Hey everyone, this is Sean. So today let me show you how to design and build RAG like a pro. RAG is basically retrieval augmented generation. It's one of the most important concepts in AI system design or for AI agents. And a lot of people who watched my previous video about AI system design really asked me to dive deeper into these kind of concepts. So today we're really going to dive deeper into what exactly does RAG work and what exactly is a vector database. And I'll not only show you something like this, which is a system design to think through how do you build or design a RAG system, but also I'll show you some live code, which I'll open source on GitHub. So feel free to check out my GitHub repo. I'll also show you how to deploy it to a Google Cloud platform, GCP, so that if you have a front end, you can just connect it into your app and start using it right away. Okay, cool, let's jump right into it and start. So I've got the system right here, but I'm gonna just walk you through it real quick. And if you already know what RAG is, feel free to jump into the coding part. First, let's imagine you're a user and you have a user channel. You either talk to customer support with web chat or an email. And then let's imagine here we're using the same example as the last video, which is a customer support for an e-commerce website where you're gonna ask questions about certain policies about the company. And let's imagine like the user has asked a question and that question is speaking to an AI agent. We have an AI agent that will speak to the user interface. So let's say the user has sent a question, ask a question to the AI agent, and then the AI agent is supposed to respond with an answer. The AI agent might not understand when it can return a product for an e-commerce site or a D2C brand because maybe some of the products are over $200 and you cannot just return the money to the user and you must check a certain policy or you must ask a certain manager to approve the return, right? So how would an AI agent know if this is an LLM, it has no access to your private data about your e-commerce site? Then we're going to introduce this concept called a vector database, which will store some of the policies about your company return policy. And also we will use the system that will do the retrieval to let the agent to retrieve the information from the database and then get informed so that the LLM knows, oh, anything over $200, we cannot just return money back to you. We must talk to your manager, okay? So let's break it down and see what exactly will happen here. So as I mentioned, we need a vector database, okay? It's a vector database that will store things like FAQs, policies, these kind of things. And the way that the AI agent will speak to it is basically a RAG, which is going to check the policy. And then the way that this vector database is built is very simple, okay? So we're going to create a frame here. The first one is that you might have a bunch of original documents, okay? Some of these documents could be in like PDF or it could be like a very long paragraph. So in order for this AI agent system to run very efficiently, we need to introduce this concept called text to chunks or anything, PDF to chunks, so that every little chunk is a piece of condensed information so that we're not like overwhelming the system, okay? Then later, we're gonna need to turn these chunks into a thing called embeddings. So what is an embedding? An embedding is basically an array of numbers in a very large dimension. What I mean by that is that, say, okay, now I'm going to input these words into ChatGPT and then it's going to give me an answer. The way ChatGPT understood it is not like, hey, it processes all the words. Instead, it's processing a bunch of numbers. So every little word that you see here to ChatGPT is probably a 1,000 dimension vector with like 0.01, 0.67, 0.86, all the way until the 1,500 something dimension, okay? So that the machine will understand, okay, so with different numbers at different dimension or at different space, it means differently, okay? So in math, there's a concept called vector similarity or embedding similarity. What it does is that maybe like the word of, French, Spanish, Chinese, these are all languages. So they're probably similar in higher dimensions in mathematics, okay? But this is not the focus of this video. If you're not technical or technical, doesn't matter, okay? So what we do is that we're gonna use the tools that are already built for us and we're gonna use it well so that this system will function properly, okay? This process is actually called seeding. I'm gonna show you in the code in the real example very soon, okay? So after we did the seeding, you have put your policy into these chunks of embeddings and then feed it into the vector database. What happens next is that because now the AI agent is doing the retrieval augmented generation by referring to the database in the vector database, and just searching for the relevant information. We're turning the customer question into embeddings as well, and we're calculating, hey, what kind of chunks are actually relevant here, so that we'll be able to align with the policy. Let me just draw this diamond here real quick. We're going to align with this policy, and then we're going to inform the AI agents so that it knows what exactly is going on with the policy. Okay? So this is already a very simple system designed for RAG, for retrieval augmented generation, and VectorDatabase. So now I'm going to show you a real example of how do you interact with a RAG system with the use case of a customer support for an e-commerce D2C brand. So I'm just going to type in the website. So you can see that this is a live link. You guys can try it as well. Now we're landing in this chatbot, not a big surprise, but now we have like 4 documents on the right-hand side, which are all related to the policy of, say, for example, how about returns, how about shipping, the guide of the sizing, as well as the support for contact. And let's just do it in one example, which is for the shipping policy, there's free shipping for anything that's over $50. So if I just ask a question and be like, I bought my shoes for $80, can I get it shipped for free? And send it over. Could have chosen a better color, but this is not the focus of this video. This is just the front end. So I say, yeah, you can get free standard shipping since your order is over $50. According to the policy, it's okay, as long as it's below $80. So I'm gonna say, I bought a pair of shoes for $30, which is very unlikely. Can I get it shipped for free? Ask the question, and then let's see what the RAG would say. Okay, it told me your thing is not qualified because it's under $30 for free shipping. There's a $50 threshold. Okay, that's one example. Let's do another example. Let's say, okay, there's a return policy and it says that every item that's over $200 require manual approval for returns and you need to email the company. So I say, okay, can I return the shoes that I bought for $1,000? Now it's doing the retrieval, doing the thinking, doing the similarity search, and it's going to tell me very soon. Okay, yes, you can return the shoes, but since the purchase amount over $200, you'll need the manual approval first. Okay, so you can see that this entire conversation with this chatbot has been strictly following the policies on the right-hand side. And you might argue that, why don't I just like feed these information into ChatGPT? Why do I need a RAG here? Well, you're right. In this case, we don't really need a RAG, but imagine this policy is like, instead of 3 paragraphs for each, it could be 300 pages. Imagine you're dealing with like legal documents or stuff like that. And then that would be a different story, okay? So in this example, we're just showing you an MVP of how it works and how you actually build it and make sure you understand the concepts. And then if you're like scaling things up, there are more things that you need to deal with for the backend, okay? So let's try another thing real quick. Let's say, okay, if anything is over $2,000, then that would need an annual approval, okay? If I save this, and I've asked the question again, I say, okay, can I return the shoes that I bought for $1,000? It told me, yes, you can return for $1,000 as long as you meet these criteria. They're unworn, blah, blah, blah. And since your purchase is under $2,000, you don't need any special approval for return. Look at this, it's like immediate. Once I like update my vector database for these documentations, immediately my app will know what exactly is the policy. How easy is that, right? Imagine you have like 300 pages of policy documents. As long as you edit it real quick, and then database sort of re-embed the entire policy, and your robot knows exactly how to answer your customer questions. Okay, I think this is very convenient. And now let me show you how to actually build it and use it, okay? You don't actually need to build anything. I already prepared the GitHub repo for you. It's open source, completely free. Just try it, okay? So my GitHub is right here. It's got shanshuang.chen/YT-RAG. YT stands for YouTube, RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, okay? So if this is the first time you're gonna touch code, don't freak out. What you can do is that you can just sort of, you can just like Command A and copy and then paste the whole thing into ChatGPT or into Cursor and ask it to tell you what you're gonna do. all right? But in this case, I'm gonna show you step by step how to do this and launch this as a full stack product. And so that you can like link it to your own project, you can even try it in your own real business, okay? And if you're a business in e-commerce brands, feel free to let me know. Happy to do some extra sessions with you if you're interested in me helping you out with these AI automation, okay? Let's jump right into it. Cool. So what we're gonna do is that firstly, I'm gonna clone the code. I'm gonna say copy this clone, okay? And then I'm gonna turn on my favorite app, which is Cursor. Let me create a new window here, okay? So I'm gonna go into my, so I'm gonna open my project, desktop, developer, and YT-rag. And I'm gonna say, okay, YT-rag showcase, okay, create that, open. All right, I just created this new folder in Cursor called YT-rag-showcase. What you gotta do is that you're gonna turn on this terminal, okay? And then what you gotta do is they're gonna say git clone and then paste this in, all right? You see, now you got this open source project, okay? So how do we deploy this and how do we use this, all right? Let me try to guide you through the README documents. So firstly, we have this architecture that has an app, that has the core service, a core folder that will basically define the configuration and infrastructure. We have the models, Pydantic models, that basically defines what are the data types that are going to be required for every model or every API. And we're going to have a service model, then we're going to have a service folder that's going to deal with all the business logic regarding RAGs, embeddings, AI agents, all these kind of stuff, all right? And then we have a main.py, which is a fast API application for the backend. If this is your first time to deal with backend, trust me, don't freak out. This is super easy. I'm not from a computer science background. I learned all of this by myself through AI, and you can do this too. And I'm gonna show you how to do it, okay? Cool, so we already did the first step, which is git clone. And now all we gotta do is we gotta go back to, let me just set this up. Now what we gotta do is that we gotta go to cd yt-rag, okay, as this said. And then we're gonna create this virtual environment, literally just copy this, okay? Paste it in your terminal. All right, so what this did is that created this virtual environment called vem_yt-rag, and then you can basically install your Python packages in it, okay? So we already have our Python packages ready, which is in requirements.tsx. We're only using these few, all right? And just paste this in. And you're gonna install the packages you need for running this project, okay? And then we're going to need to set up our vector database. In this case, we're using Supabase for the vector database. We're going to use the PG vector. I know there are a lot of options on the market. There's Pinecone, there's Weaviate, and we're not talking about which one is better here. I'm just talking about how it works, okay? Feel free to try other tools if you want to. Okay, cool, let's get started. So the reason why we need to set up Supabase, one is because we need to set up this place where it's going to store these policies for documentations. Number two is that we need these keys from Supabase so that our app is connected to the database, so that they're communicating with each other, okay? Just follow me, trust me, like this is pretty easy. We can do this. Cool. So let me start creating a new Supabase project for us. Supabase.com, okay? If I go to dashboard, let me make it bigger. I can go to YouTube. You can see that I already have a YT-rag. I'm going to create a new one just for this showcase. You can click on new project, and then I'm going to say YT-rag-showcase, and then I just input in my database password, and let's just create the project. I'm going to delete this later, so don't even try to use things here because I'm going to show some keys here, and I'm going to just delete it. Don't try to use it, and you should set it up yourself, okay? Cool. So now we've set up this Supabase. Let's see what's going to happen next. Okay, let's come back to the GitHub. You see that wait for the project to be ready, and then go to settings and get all these APIs and copy them into our code. All right. So I'm going to do it. So go to Supabase. Come over here. I think if I just scroll down, yeah. If you just scroll down, you can see that there's project URL and API keys here, and then we're just literally gonna firstly, we can see that there is a file called .m.example. All right, we're going to copy this and paste this again, and we're just going to call it .m instead of .n example, so that this is for production. And then we're going to copy the project URL here. Click on copy. You can see there's a project URL. Replace this with the real one. And then you can see that there's this anon public key. Copy that. Come here. Replace the second one with it. Hit Command S to save it. The third one is the service role key. Service role key is right here. Let's see. Let's go to project setting. And then we can find API keys. And then we can see this service role key. All right. Going to reveal it. Copy it. Come back here, paste it in, Command S to save it. Okay, I'm going to delete all these projects. So if we click back into table editor, you can see that we don't have tables now. We're going to set it up real quick. All right. One small thing is that you can see that in this environment variables right now, there's an AI provider. I'm choosing Anthropic. You can also replace it with OpenAI, right? And then there's also like this OpenAI key, OpenAI embedding model. We're actually using this embedding model to embed these words. Remember, we say we're going to turn every word into a 1,500 dimension of numbers, right? And then we're going to use OpenAI. If you're using OpenAI, you're going to use GPT-4o. If you're using Anthropic, you're going to use Anthropic chat model, which is, in our case, I'm going to use 3.5. Doesn't matter. Choose whatever you want, okay? Last but not least, the environment's development and log info is info right now, okay? So what's missing in the environment variable is just I need my OpenAI key and my Anthropic API key. Okay. So I'm just gonna paste my own keys here. Here I'm gonna block it, and if you don't know where to find it, you can just literally search OpenAI API key on Google, and then you can just create an OpenAI key. Log in if you haven't logged in. Just click on create new keys and type a name here, and then copy it, right? And then you're gonna start using it. Anthropic is the same thing. Now, we're going to initialize the database. The way we do that is we have a file called SQL/init supabase.sql. Just do Command A, Command C, come to your Supabase, come to the left-hand side, there's a SQL editor, open it, click in, Command V to paste it, Command Enter to run it. Okay, you see, oh, your Supabase database is ready for RAG. Okay, what did we do exactly? I'll briefly explain. Go to the left sidebar. Let me just make it bigger for you. Go to the left sidebar, click on table editor. You can see there's a table here called rag_chunks. Okay. Remember earlier we said we need to do this thing called seeding, which we're going to turn original documents into text chunks and then embed the text chunks. Okay. Here I'm going to show you how to do that exactly. So for now, you can see this table that has ID, chunk ID, source, where does the chunk come from? Text, what exactly is in that chunk? What is the embedding for this text, right? When is it created? That's all. We're just keeping things simple here. If you go to the sidebar and click on database, you can see that there's one table here listed, and then you can also click into functions. Okay, why we're in the functions? That's because if we go back to this, we actually define some functions here. One function is called match chunks. You can just copy this and come back here and then search match chunks. You see, this is basically doing like matching, like doing the retrieval, right? Comparing if your query embedding is similar to the embedding that you added to the chunk, all right? And there's several other functions that we defined. There's also a function called get chunk stats, right? Let's just search this here real quick. Yeah, and you can also click on these three dots and click on edit function to edit things. And if you're familiar with the SQL, you will know what's going on. It's gonna select from the RAG chunks and count how many total chunks you have, what are some unique sources you have, and what is the total maximum, and what is the latest time when you update the chunk table, okay? So this is called Supabase functions. Again, this is not the focus of the video. If you're interested in Supabase, feel free to watch my previous videos on Supabase. Let's move on, continue. Come back to this, you can see that we initialize the database. So here, one thing interesting to explain is that we're using this thing called PG Vector, which is part of Postgres, and is basically a way to save VectorDatabase, right? Again, feel free to use Pinecone, Weaviate, or LangChain stuff. All these things work, right? Doesn't matter, you don't have to use this one. Okay, so with the RAG chunks table, currently we're using a vector of dimension 3072 dimensions. So that's like doubling of 1500 when I said it. Okay, so now let's move on. Oh, sorry. Now let's move on. So you can see that I have this thing called test setup.py. Okay, let's come back here. Let's see, where is it? We have this file called test setup.py. So what this test setup does is that I'm doing a few things. Firstly, I'm going to import the modules. Second, I'm going to check the configuration. And then I'm going to start doing the database connection. And then I'm going to start doing the schema validation. And now I'll do the seeding documentation. Look at this. I'm doing the seeding documentation so that we're seeding the documents into our database so that later we can do the RAG query. I'm going to show you step by step, okay? Feel free to just run this doc if you're familiar with this. But if you're not familiar with this, I'll show you what exactly we're going to do, okay? So firstly, how does seeding work, okay? So the main.py is an app/main.py, okay? So this is basically our backend endpoint. What it does is that, sorry, maybe it looks scary if you're not technical, but I'll explain everything as I always mention, okay? Firstly, you have this lifespan definition. What it does is basically just going to try to, connect to the database, initialize the schema, all these kind of stuff. And then we have this thing called fast API. We're defining fast API as this name called app. So anything with app.something, that's fast API, okay? And then we're gonna add this middleware, which is basically saying, hey, localhost 3000, localhost 3001, they're accessible to this backend. Because if you're building like the front end with Next.js, you'll be able to, use localhost 3000 or Vercel as your URL. We're just basically telling the backend that these URLs can access you, right? So that there's no access issues. And then we have a chat interface, which is an HTML. Here we're not using Next.js, we're just using a plain front end, okay? And then what's important is that we can just sort of like start trying things, okay? So what I'm gonna do is that, remember to do source vim yt_rag bin/activate. So what you can do is just, you can type in uvcorn main app -- reload. After we run this, we're gonna get a live backend called 127.0.0.1 8000. Okay, so if I just do command click on this thing, it's gonna show me this thing called welcome to RAG AI agent backend version blah 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 blah. Okay, and a quick way to check it is that there's this thing called basically you can check either the health of it or it can do something fun. Like for me, I did like /greet/name so that it will tell me if it actually worked. So if you go to this URL and do /greet/Sean, it's going to tell you, hey Sean, I think you're great. Okay, and if I just greet like Donald, hey Donald, I think you're great. So this is like working. Okay, this is working. And or you can just type in /health, right? And then it's going to tell you, oh, database connected is true. All right. So now let's move on. So here are the three things that are very important. The first one is an endpoint called the /documents. This is where we're going to save all the documents, okay? So if you go to /documents, it's going to return to you what documents you have, all right? So let's try that. So if you do /documents, you can see all the documents we have. And I'll show you in the code, where is it? So if I just do double click command default, command C, command F, command V, search, you can see that we imported from this, okay? Which is, where is it? From data/default documents. So from data folder, where's data folder? There we go. Data folder/default documents. So these are the documents for the policies that we're gonna input, all right? So we're gonna have a policy for return, if you still remember in our app. We have a policy for return, v1, policy for shipping, sizing guide, and support contact, okay? So we have basically this exact same thing. Policy return, policy for shipping, policy for sizing, and policy for support and contact, okay? So if we go back to main.py, so if you go back to app/main.py, if you call the API of the URL/documents, it's basically going to show you the default documentations as I showed you earlier, okay? Another endpoint is called /seed. What this one does is they're going to take the input of the documentation and then start showing you, hey, we're gonna like turn your documents into chunk ID, source, and text. Remember, this is how we're going to store it in the database, all right? So this API, I'm literally going to show you how to turn these documentation into the database, all right? So what it does is that it firstly split your thing into chunks, all right? Split thing into chunks. And then it's gonna show you, and then it's gonna run this function called rag service C documents. You can do command click into this, sorry. And then it's gonna run this function called the rag C documents, okay? And then it will get to this the inserted account. So how did the whole thing happen, right? Let me show you. So if you run this API, what it does is that it's gonna run this function for you. Okay, let's find out where is this function. Command C, Command F, Command V. All right. We define it in services.rag. Right? We have a folder called services. This is basically where we're gonna save all these AI agents, right? Or agent-related stuff. So let's go to rag.py. Within the rag.py, remember I mentioned that we have a function called seed documents. What this one does is that it's going to turn your documents into chunks and turn chunks into embeddings. Okay, so let's briefly go through it. We have a function here that said, okay, we're going to use the chunk function to chunk the documentations, and then we're going to embed the documentation using embedding service, which is imported from embedding.py. And last but not least, we're going to combine the chunks into embeddings so that we can insert it into the database. Okay, let's check the embedding. Let's check the embedding.py real quick too. In the embedding, what we do is that you can see that here we have embed text. What it does is it uses this OpenAI client with embeddings to create the embeddings based on the text input. Remember, we already cut the text into smaller chunks, so it's gonna embed every text into embeddings. Okay. I know I say a lot of tongue twisters. Let's just run it and see what happens, all right? So all you gotta do is that if you have defined properly of your default documentations, what we can do is that we can just do test the setup to set up the whole thing, okay? So come to your terminal. Again, if you are not in your virtual environment, do source venv yt-s_rag bin activate, okay? And then we're gonna do Python test setup. Now it's going to run this setup, and I'll show you what exactly we're doing. So we imported the modules, testing the configuration, did the database connection, schema, documentation, seeding. You can see that it successfully seeded the 4 document chunks. And then it tested the RAG, it worked, okay? And it passed everything. Okay, so now if we go back to the database, go to the left sidebar, table editor. You're going to see all 4 documentations are here. All right, policy, return, shipping, guide, contact, and you can see where the source is from, and you can see what the text exactly is if you double click on it. Okay, anything that items over $200 require manual approval for return, and then there's this embedding that is 3,000 columns of dimension. And if you do this /chat, you're able to turn it on, and now you have these policies right here, okay? So this is literally using what we define here, okay? So let me prove it to you by making this a little bit smaller, making this a little bit smaller, and our eye should be focused on our terminal here, okay? So what we're gonna do is that I'm just gonna say, okay, what is my return policy? I hit send. You can see that here it's running because now it's doing the VectorDatabase retrieval, and you can see that it's using Anthropic, all right? And then it did the query processing with 1 citation, so that means it found 1 reference, 1 citation, all right, which is the policy that we refer to, return policy, okay? And I just asked the question again, can I return my product that was $800? You see now it's doing this another retrieval again, and then you see that it tells me since your item's over $200, you will need manual approval for the return. Okay, so now we prove that this RAG system already works. All right, it already works. One more thing I want to show you is the chat. If you click on services/chat.py, you can see that we're currently doing this function called generate answer. What this one does is that there's a system prompt, right? It says that you're a helpful AI assistant for customer support, and there's some important rules. It basically says you can only answer questions for policy, return, shipping, and sizing. And you should, for questions outside of the knowledge base, you can just politely reject that, all right? And then we can just test it real quick too. You can say, who is the US president now? Yeah, I apologize. It's not relevant, so he's not gonna answer me, okay? Feel free to play around with this GitHub if you're technical. And if you're not technical, if you follow this exact steps that I talked about, you can set this up for your business. Happy to help you to set up for you if you're interested in this kind of AI automation. And the last step I do is I'm gonna make this live. I always wanna make product live because I feel like that's the final step you do. Like that's the core of building a product. It needs to be live. It needs to be able to be used by someone. Let's do that. Cool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my Google Cloud. So I normally use Google Cloud for this. And I already have a project. If you don't have a project, feel free to click on here and then click on create a new project, okay? But that's not in the scope of ours. So I already have a project. I'm gonna go right into Cloud Run on the left-hand sidebar, okay? And then I'm gonna select a project, which is the project I created. And you can see all the projects that I have here. And I already have one called YT-rag, and the rest of them are my previous projects. So what I do is that I first need to commit the code to the GitHub, and then we can connect it through GitHub into Google Cloud, okay? So let's try this real quick. Let's come back to cursor. And one thing I didn't show you earlier is how to connect to GitHub. And if you're creating your own thing, you can also come back to your folder and do remove-rf git, okay? Hit run. Create a new repository, okay? And I'm just gonna say yt-rag / private showcase, okay? Create the repository. Git remote add. Make sure you navigate your folder into yt-rag, and then git branch name. Okay, let's come back here. Command R to refresh it. Cool, this is good. So now we got this, all right? We got the whole thing. Let's come back to Google Cloud. Let's click on Connect Repo in Cloud Run. Let's set up the cloud build name, all right? And then I'm gonna click on here to repository. You can say yt-rag dash. You can see I have two of them, but I'm gonna use the private showcase, understand, next. Okay, we're gonna use this thing called Dockerfile. Okay, what this one does is basically telling Google Cloud that you need to install requirements.txt. And the main working directory is app. Come back here and just hit on save. Okay, and I'm gonna allow public access because it's not a big deal right now. And then if I come back here, there's an important thing called variable and secrets under containers. We need to add the variables here. Select the whole thing, paste it here, okay, and just hit on create. Now you're deploying the app, okay? So this will be a URL. All right, so now creating the service. By the way, now if you go to your GitHub and if you refresh it, you can see that something's running here, right? Because we're connected to GCP through Docker. Right? You can click on the details. You can see that it's in progress. So it's very well integrated. So if you click on view more details on Google Cloud, you can see how exactly it's been built. You see it's very well connected. If you click on this commit thing, it will lead you back to your GitHub for the exact commit. Oh, good. So now we're officially live. And then we click on yt-rag private showcase. You can see we have this URL here. Copy this, Command T, Command V. Good. Guys, this is live. And then let's do /chat. Cool, we got our policies here. So for return, let's say it should become, if anything is over $8,000, all right? If I hit on save, by the way, double click here again. You see, it changed into 8,000 immediately. And they updated this embedding as well, immediately, okay? So this template really works well. Okay, so now if I ask the exact same question again, it's doing retrieval on an updated database, VectorDatabase, and it's gonna tell me, yes, you can return it and purchase 1,000, which is lower than 8,000 is fine. This is the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this is straightforward. I hope this is easy to follow. And again, I would like to hear any feedback from most of you guys. And a lot of people ask me for making more videos regarding, showing you AI agent system design. and people also ask me about deployment, so I'm trying to keep the balance. So let me know if this format of video works for you. Like, I'll show the system design at the beginning, and I'll show you like the exact code example, and I'll open source the code on GitHub and show you how to deploy it. Let me know if this kind of format of content is really helpful for you. I don't think anyone else, I didn't find any other YouTubers or influencers doing this. So I'm sort of also experimenting this myself. And at the same time, if you're a business, if you're running an e-commerce website or D2C brand, I'm running my own startup called Automanus.io, which is basically an AI agent system that helps people selling physical products to manage their sales leads. And I'm also open for discussing any AI automation requests or demands from a business perspective. Just let me know. And I have all my social media contacts down below in the description and in the comment section. So feel free to reach out.